All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a discussion of Brothers of the Wind by Tad Williams. Now, if you're familiar with Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, this is a book that takes place before that original trilogy. So this is
Well before.
before Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. And it also, I think it's the perfect thing to read where we are in the
Oh
sequel
yeah.
series right now. I think that's when it was actually published. It was, so we've been doing The Last King of Osten Ard, in case you weren't aware. And we started by talking about The Heart of What Was Lost, which is a prequel novella to The Last King of Osten Ard. And Nikhil hosted that one. And then we moved on to The Witchwood Crown, which Ben hosted the discussion for The Witchwood Crown. That's the first proper big fat chunker of a novel in The Last King of Osten Ard. And then we moved on to Empire of Grass, which Andy Smith hosts. Hopefully Andy is going to be here. We're not sure where he is, but we messaged him, and hopefully Andy, you're out there. You'll show up. And now we're talking about, before we conclude with the last two novels in The Last King of Osten Ard, we went and read Brothers of the Wind, which is, I think it is the best place to read this. Although you could honestly read this before even reading Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn.
Yeah.
Before starting The Last King of Osten Ard. It is a prequel that takes place like 1,000 years before Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. So you can read it any old time, but because of the backstory you get here, it is kind of the perfect place to read it when you're right in the middle of The Last King of Osten Ard. But we're going to keep our discussion to Brothers of the Winds. I think, guys, we can keep it relatively. I mean, obviously, we haven't even read Into the Narrow Dark, which is the next novel. So no spoilers out there in the chat. If you've read the entirety, please, of Last King of Osten Ard. We haven't gotten to the end of it yet. We may spoil things but first we'll start non-spoiler. But when we do go spoiler, we may spoil things in the Witchwood Crown and Empire of Grass. So just be aware of that. But that's only when we start with the spoilers. We're going to start with our spoiler-free assessments of Brothers of the Wind. So I'm going to ask my wonderful guests here their thoughts on, spoiler-free for now, on Brothers of the Wind. So Ben, what did you think of this book?
Oh man, I really liked it. This was just a fascinating read for so many reasons. I had no clue what to expect. And I certainly got something that just was unexpected, because it's this new type of first-person retrospective kind of narrative perspective going on from a Tanukadaya, and it's a really meditative perspective with a character who's not very self-aware and very observant, and it's just a fascinating place to be spending time in with our narrator Payman Kess. And then I knew who the main character, or one of the main characters, was going to be. It was following these two brothers, Inaluki and Hakatri, and if you read the initial trilogy, you know what role Inaluki might play in things, and but it just played out in unexpected ways, and it was constantly surprising me about discovering more about these Scythy characters and the world at this time, like thousands of years before Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and it was just so fascinating to see how it had changed in those intervening years, and then just to see the development of this plot. Like, it felt like maybe a major callback to Beowulf, which is why I was excited to get you on this chat, Philip, because it seemed like Williams is kind of pulling on some kind of mythical storytelling tropes here, and then like things were occurring very quickly, more quickly than I was expecting, and then I was like, where's the second half of the book gonna go? And like it just kept on going to interesting, weird new places, and all, I think, really going to contribute to the overarching series as well in a really valuable way. So I thought it was a strange read, because it was different, but in a good way. And I found myself taking my time with it and not speeding through. And if I just tried to speed through, I think you'd find the events happening like pretty quickly. But like it felt fairly kind of slow moving and meditative, especially because I took it fairly slow. Just there's not even really chapters, but just like kind of like I tried to grab little parts here and there at a time, and not just inhale it whole. So it was like a very slow moving meditative read for me, which I was really into.
Beautiful. And we have a couple reactions here. So Heidi disagreed with the idea that you could read this before Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, saying that you need all the world building before you pick this one up. I do think that you would probably get more out of it in that sense, being familiar with the world. Although the world you get here, I love the fact that the map is the same geographically, but the names are all different because this is before the kingdoms that we know and love in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn have been established for the most part. Although you do get some hints of what's to come, so to speak. And if you know the history through Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, it does add weight to, I think, some of the sense of foreboding and foreshadowing in Brothers of the Wind about what will happen to these people who are here. So Heidi is probably right that you would get a little more out of it that way if you read it in publication order. Essentially, that's usually the recommendation. But Mick Scarfield says he actually did read this before starting The Last King of Osten Ard. So not before Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, but before The Last King of Osten Ard. So he read it before starting The Witchwood Crown. And I'm sure that you get a ton out of it either way. But anyway, Nikhil, what are your thoughts, spoiler free, on Brothers of the Wind?
Gosh, I mean, I hesitate to say this because I feel like a novella and a novel can't be compared in the same way because, it's like when you look at Witchwood Crown, when you look at Empire of Grass, I felt like each one for me was getting better as it went. And I was interested to see how I would feel about a novella now midway through. And I actually kind of agree with Heidi that, like, I got so much more about, out of the Tinukudaya culture and everything like that, the lore that Paimon Kes experiences in this because we were introduced to them a little bit in Empire of Grass. So I feel like that kind of made me more invested in what this mythical mystery civilization is and how it evolved, but what I almost hesitate to say is I think this might be my favorite one in the series so far.
Wow.
Which is kind of insane to think about because it's like I love Simon and Miriamel's story. I love like the whole city, the Norn culture, all the stuff that you get introduced to in The Last King of Osten Ard so far. I just loved it, but I don't know. I mean, the prose I felt was a little different in this book than how it is in the first couple, which I love the slow burn, and this is very meditative in a way that only Tad Williams can do. But I also feel the prose is a bit more direct, and there's like less page count, and so the way it's paced also is very different. And I just was so immersed in this from start to finish. I felt like there was no page that I felt like I wasn't or I was kind of losing track of things or anything like that. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing was, Paymon's character as the observer of these events and the narrator of the tale. It's so fascinating to me because he's kind of learning stuff as we're learning it. So it almost feels like we're almost in his POV at times, And Hakatri's character is probably one of my favorite characters in the series so far. I just made such an impression on me. And I don't want to spoil too much from Witchwood Crown and Empire of Grass, but basically or can I mention stuff from that here or should I wait?
Well, just anyone in the chat who hasn't read those, plug your ears while Nikhil talks, and then we'll wait when he's done.
I was never here. I was thinking, like the bones of Hakatris and stuff like that. The Queen Utuku's they're trying to dig up and resurrect, and it was interesting because when you get a sense of who he is as a character in this novella, it begs the question of how that would all come to pass because his character in this is very different to how I perceived his character in Empire of Grass, would have been. So I don't know. I was just utterly taken by this and
I love
very
that.
surprised.
I love that. I love that. But yeah, like Hakatri comes up as a name in Empire of Grass, basically just a quick name. And it's right towards the end of the book where that name comes up. And so it had no impact, like hearing like, oh, they have Hakatris, but now we live with this character and it has so much more meaning, their appearance in the present day series. And so, that I just love how he's using this kind of prequel book to add so much impact to the other books. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, Hakatri is actually mentioned in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Even
Wow.
the bones of this story, no pun intended, are actually in. It's already told in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn as kind of like mythology. But now we're getting a first-person observer from the time telling the story. But we knew this story essentially already from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. So Heidi is saying to you, Nikhil, not so insane. This is my favorite, only after Witchwood Crown. And Mix Garfield is in reaction to your words about Hakatri. Yes, such a tragic character. That indeed is the case. So my non-spoiler thoughts on Brothers of the Wind. I love how you both picked up on that. This is different. This is a little bit like Tad Williams, a tiny version of the Silmarillion in a sense. This is a Silmarillion type story in relation to Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and Last King of Osten Ard, in the sense that it's the older mythology. The story, as I just said, this story gets told in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, but in a more bare way and as kind of mythology, legend, of a past age. But now we get the first person narrative of not one of the two brothers, but of the servant of one of the brothers, the servant of Hakatri, the narrator Pamenkes, whose name you already mentioned, who is a vow, as I like to call him, because it's a lot easier to say than Tinukedea. And that's what they call themselves. So I figured that's the right thing to do.
Fair enough.
But they're the vow. And I do feel that we're getting, as much as we are getting that story fleshed out, the story of Hakatri, and a lot of interesting insights into Inaluki, who is the Storm King in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. We're getting insights into both of these characters, and that's wonderful. But I also feel like in terms of its placement within The Last King of Osten Ard, we're getting some interesting development in terms of who the Tinukedea are, the vow. Who are these people? What are they in relation to the Zidaya and the Hikedea, or their so-called masters, right? Who we know that historically they have been mistreated, that they've been exploited, that the Scythi and the Norns have done some bad things to the Tinukedea in the past. That they have there's something, and we haven't even gotten the whole story yet, but we know that this is an oppressed people in many ways. And they also have a special relationship with the world they came from, that all three of these peoples came from at one time, that they are these shape changers who morph to fit their environment, and that they also have a magic which the others don't have, and we don't really understand it fully yet. And I love the fact that we have this naive narrator who is, though he is a Tinukedea, he is a vow, he doesn't know anything about his own people. Which is frustrating sometimes, but also I would say appropriate, because they have a culture which has deliberately been suppressed or oppressed, that they are unaware of many of them of their own history, because there's been a deliberate effort probably to eradicate it, which is often the case when you have colonized and exploited peoples, right? It makes sense that he would be so out of touch, that he identifies so much with his so-called masters people, that he doesn't even know his own people's language, for example. He doesn't know his own culture, their history. So we're learning about it as he's learning about it, which is cool, right? That's a nice device that Tad Williams uses in Brothers of the Wind. So I feel like this is, in a way, it is the story of Hakatri. It is the story of Inaluki. Some really cool fleshing out of these two characters, one of whom is just mentioned as a myth or a legend. The other who is the big baddie, really, in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. But we don't really know him at all. We don't see his perspective at all. And the character we meet here, okay, now you can see how this happened, how he would become eventually the Storm King, the seeds of it in his personality, so to speak. Not an entirely unsympathetic character, though, in some ways. So, but yeah, I love that he's done all of this in Brothers of the Wind. It was a really great read for me, tonally different from both Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and The Last King of Osten Ard. This is One, it's first person, so it's Kess's voice that we're getting here, which is different from the third person narration we have in all the other stories. And the other thing is it's older, and I think that Tad Williams does a great job of letting us feel that this is different from all the other stories that have been told in this world. This is an older story, so we have not in the sense that it doesn't inhibit, the reading or in any way, but it is a little more archaic, a little stiffer maybe than his normal narration. And I like that. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
And the narration was so subtle on a character level, because Payman Kess is this kind of like emotionally repressed character with a lot of like psychological traumas, and I think Williams handled it in such a nuanced, subtle way where we, the reader, get insight into his character that he doesn't seem to have yet, and him developing romantic affinities that he doesn't really become aware of, and his resentment of Hakatri occasionally popping up. Like there's all these, but his true love for Hakatri as well, this person that raised him up from his lowly status and gave him this place of honor. Like there were all these really emotional nuances that Williams was just like brilliant with handling this first person character, and through this kind of retrospective narration, I thought it was really well done. And I don't think it's gonna, because of its placement in epic fantasy and within a large series, it's kind of nestled away in this hidden corner of the literary world. But like, this is a very similar read to Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro, which was one of the major reasons he ended up winning a Nobel Prize. It's like, that's about this butler character and him telling this kind of story of his life as this kind of servant, and hitting a lot of the similar notes, but that one's realist fiction, and so it gets widely read and praised throughout the world, and this one's just a hidden gem for us. But yeah, I'm thrilled we got to it.
Yeah, people don't know what they're missing out on, that's for sure.
I totally agree. It is incredible to me that this series, I mean, honestly, I feel like Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn is not read enough. It does not get enough attention. But the fact that this series is so little talked about is just, it's an absolute, like, what? I mean, come on, this is some of the best epic fantasy you can read. But this comment from Valora, speaking of the emotional resonance that you were talking about, Ben, I was not surprised after reading Brothers of the Wind that others compared it somewhat to Tolkien's Children of Húrin. So there you go. Thank you for validating my comparison to the Silmarillion. But this story was even more touching because of the characters' relations, and I think that's probably true. Yeah, and you can feel the pain of. I mean, there's physical pain, but there's also there's some beauty in that bond as well. The master servant relationship in here. It is problematic in some ways because of this history of oppression, but it also is a beautiful relationship between our narrator and his master Hakatri. So that I agree with. There's some real emotional resonance here. And Heidi tells us that Tad reads this novella on his channel. So if you ever want to reread, he comments on writing when he does his readings. That is awesome to know. Thank you, Heidi.
That's so cool.
I actually did not even realize he had a channel. So thank you for making us aware of this. And Flying Squirrel says, really, the last book is for sure my favorite in the series. Second favorite, probably The Heart of What Was Lost. So there, we got something to look forward to, guys.
Sweet.
And another comment from Heidi. Hakatri has so much integrity, the poster boy for it. Absolutely agree. It is hard to recommend Brothers since you have to start with Dragonbone. Yeah, it's a shame that it's buried, as you said.
Yeah. And but Nikhil was talking a little bit about why he maybe loved it so much as a kind of change up from the usual sprawling larger books in the series. And I was just thinking about that, and it really is so narratively focused. Like it's linear basically in time. Like you're just following this one narrator and the few people, and sometimes we meet other people as we travel around, but it's this tight kind of story that's following this one character, and mostly with Hakatri just across a few years, and so we cover a lot of time in not that many pages, and so things do move, but it's we are never going away to a different location and perspective. Like it's just so tight and focused and propulsive in that way. So it's easy to, I think, just get completely hooked in.
I also saw some parallels between just kind of speaking about time and the reference points. Like I saw some characters parallels. Like if you think about Paimon and a character like Nezuru, you know, who very different circumstances, but their idea of like not really questioning the extreme burden that they place on themselves, you know, unwittingly as a result of their sense of duty. And some other external forces, you know, speaking to them about that and questioning them about that. And both of them going, what do you mean? Like, this is how it's supposed to be. This is how it's, you know, they hadn't never even thought about any life outside that paradigm, which they have kind of been set up in. So, you know, it was just interesting to see. It's like, oh, that kind of reminds me of, you know, XYZ.
Yeah.
And there's, I feel like, you know, Philip, you mentioned Inaluki is also kind of a tragic character in a way, and there's some empathizing with him, especially at this stage. And I feel the same probably with every character in this novella. You know, Paimon, same thing. You know, with his love interest and stuff, and again his sense of duty to Hakatri and a Hakatri, of course, himself. And yeah.
One more thing on the non-spoiler front. In paperback, mine is like 260 pages, and then I looked up the word count, and it was around like 100,000 words, which I think is basically like 2.5 times the word count of like what a maximum is considered like a novella. So I know, like, so it gets thrown around. I think that's another reason it gets marginalized, because it's like, oh, that's like a novella side story in the series. Like, this is a legit novel-sized work.
In comparison to the novels, okay, but a normal novel length actually this is not a novella, really.
Yeah.
So that's another reason I think it gets kind of, you know, put by the wayside, or is not. But it's this whole Last King of Osten Ard series, for whatever reason, hasn't caught on in, you know, the fantasy sphere, like even his original trilogy, which it does. You know, it feels like because he took a major break, it wasn't like a continuous thing he wrote. That's probably the reason why. But it's crazy that so much of the audience in Memory Star and Thorn didn't follow on, or at least like, you know, looking at Goodreads ratings, and just the only way I have to go on how many people are reading it.
It's a fairly reliable measure. About, you can add a 0 to however many ratings are on Goodreads, and that's a pretty reliable measure most of the time of how many sales there have been. So I'm going to highlight a few comments here. Yeah, we don't know where Andy is. Hopefully he'll show up. We all messaged him before, and absolutely no worries about the comment reading. I just like to include you guys in our discussion wherever I can. And Demi Drek Hayward just finished the book 2 days ago. Excellent timing. Question about, and this is a question about how do we know how Hakatri goes from where we left him off to where we end up seeing him in Empire of Grass? I think the answer is no right now. We because we're not doing spoilers yet, but in a moment we'll start with spoilers and we can explain what we know, I think. But as far as the gap there between this and where we meet Hakatri, or what's left of him in Empire of Grass, or actually is in the Witchwood Crown.
They retrieved the bones in Witchwood Crown.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah.
It's in Witchwood Crown. But yeah, we don't know about, there's a bit of a gap there. But I don't think there's a big gap, but there's a little bit of a gap. And here we have a wonderful suggestion, actually. If I can make this thing work here. It doesn't want to. There we go. And if you want to turn a knife a bit more, afterward you can reread the series. The scenes in Stone of Farewell where Amaterasu speaks to Hakatri. Yeah.
Oh.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's a real, one of the highlights of the read was like seeing like, oh my God, this character, much younger, like popped up in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, or, you know, it's like, well, I've seen that name before. Oh, like that name I've seen. This name, like that was a really kind of fun game to play during this. Yeah.
Absolutely. couple more comments I want to highlight. Here's our good friend PL Stewart, just popping in to say hi. Don't want to get spoiled. Oh yeah, we don't want to spoil you because it's a really great read. Currently reading Navigator's Children. Okay, so he's reading it, and you'll be interested to find out what happens in here if you're reading Navigator's Children right now. That's for sure. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting there. But we've got to get through Into the Narrow Dark after this, and then Navigator's Children. So, and then speaking of old friends, look who's here. It's Ruth and Bad.
Wow.
Brilliant Malazan commenter. His channel is all Malazan, and it's if you haven't read the Malazan Book of the Fallen, you don't want to necessarily watch it because all his videos are spoilery, but they're brilliant. And he says Tad Williams and Steven Erickson did a pretty fun interview together over a decade ago. Yeah, I think I've seen that. I really enjoyed Brothers of the Wind. I didn't know you'd read this, Ruth and Bad, so that is awesome. And then we've got I absolutely agree. I'm going to be reading this again someday. And yeah, that's what I thought about your gap. So yeah.
Jeez.
All right.
I think, I just get this feeling, given the trajectory of how this has been going, if it continues on this trajectory, like, I think the series is going to be right up there with Malazan for me, like in terms of all timers. Yeah.
It's a great series. This just deserves so much more recognition. But I think we're done with the non-spoiler part of this discussion. So if you have not yet read Brothers of the Wind, this is your warning. We are going to dive into spoilers now. So we're doing the spoiler wave here, and we are going to be saying goodbye to you. But thank you for coming along and read this book. It's fantastic. Probably you get the most out of it if you read it in publication order, but I think you could read it really any time before Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. But just know that it is tonally different from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and from the Last King of Osten Ard. So don't form an impression of those series just from this, I would say. It's more like lore kind of thing, So, guys, let's do spoilers. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
One of the interesting things right from the beginning, I thought, if we want to start just towards the beginning, was seeing what it's like with the Scythy kind of ruling the land, and they're the major political players and military power, and
you see it right on the map. The names on the map, right?
Yeah, and the mortals are coming to them. The herdsmen are coming to them, asking them for aid, helping protect them against a dragon, and just seeing like how the tables were completely turned towards the present day, where like the Scythy are this last remnant that's living in in different little enclaves, but the mortals have completely taken over most of the landmass of the continent, and a lot of what Inaluki was worried about ended up coming to pass in some way. But seeing the Scythy like living and ruling over Aswa was interesting. And then in the beginning, it's like I feel like a lot of it was just setting up the brothers, of characterizing like Inaluki and Hakatri, and their kind of interesting, close, loving relationship, but also like a little bit combative, where Inaluki is this and Hakatri is this very noble, honorable, kind of thoughtful, persona. But seeing that they still really care for each other and we're close, like so that was interesting, just seeing the setup. I like Inaluki, eventually being the like more of a direct kind of evil presence in the book, but Tad surprising me by showing Inaluki being this really complex, nuanced character throughout was a really fun thing to follow along the whole thing. But I am curious about that beginning setup and this whole quest to slay the worm, because we have a Beowulf and Middle Ages and I was curious if this was ringing any bells, or if this is or am I looking at similarities, or like is Williams playing on certain mythical tropes here, do you think, to certain effect?
Most definitely he is. Yes. I think I heard your question. I don't know if it was for you, Nikhil, but for me, Ben, you were
cutting out a little bit. Yeah.
But I think I heard your question. I don't know why it's freezing and stuff, but it's not now. You're good now, it looks like. But anyway, I think you were asking about is Williams essentially, is he playing on some myth and much older stories. And you mentioned Beowulf, which pleases me to no end. But yes, most definitely. And again, that's the tonal difference here, I think, is that he is giving us a dragon slaying story, essentially. And there are several, you can look at that. You can't say that this is exactly like the Beowulf slaying or like the slaying of Fafnir. But the idea that the dragon's blood would be something you would want to be careful about. And that's something you do see in these older stories. And in Beowulf, for example, it's not good to get dragon blood on you. Interestingly, though, in versions of the Volsung saga, where you have the slaying of Fafnir the dragon, the hero deliberately bathes in the dragon blood after slaying the dragon. And it even goes with that little trope where he's trying to get his whole body covered with the dragon blood because it makes your flesh invulnerable to wounds and such. And a leaf falls on his back while he's bathing himself in the dragon blood. So he misses a spot, and what's going to happen to Sigurd later when he missed that one little spot on his back. That he's going to get killed through that spot, and he gets literally stabbed in the back. But yeah, so it is definitely Williams is definitely drawing from much older stories in this, and yep. So Mick Scarfield here is. That's what I was talking about. Sigurd or Siegfried in the Nibelungenlied. That's the Middle High German version of the story. And then you've got Mick Scarfield commenting here on Michael Moorcock's Coram books. Okay, as an inspiration for the Scythe, and Elric's Melniboneans as an inspiration for the Norns. Okay, that could work. That could work.
What was so fascinating about the beginning here of the quest was that initially, Inaluki is so skeptical about helping the mortals. He thinks they're beneath so beneath the Scythe that they shouldn't involve in moral matters. And then Hakatri's like, no, we should do the honorable thing. We're supposed to protect them. Let's go see the worm. And but like their parents are skeptical that they should do this. But then like Inaluki takes it as more like he eventually becomes a point of pride for him. And it feels like there's this hubris or this fatal flaw kind of thing going on of his both hubris that he's gonna go slay the dragon, and and then this pride or stubbornness in not being able to take back an oath and a promise, and he's gonna lose his honor if he does that. And so Inaluki drives a lot of this early action with all of his moodiness and brashness. But interestingly, Katri was the one initially who was wanting to do right by the mortals and aid them. But all those dynamics here were so interesting to observe from like the sidelines from Payman.
That was the part that made me feel also like how like with the whole Queen Utuku finding the bones and resurrecting him, to what end? Because if his character is somebody who in life was decent and epitome of moral duty, why would he be such a formidable weapon when used against the mortals? And I wonder, did this kind of a resurrection, does it kind of twist the person's like soul, or like the being's soul, and make them the opposite, the antithesis of what they were? It's just interesting. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, she didn't need to do that, of course, with Inaluki, right? When she
yeah.
used Inaluki in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, he's the Storm King. And you can see the seeds of that character. You can see also him being corrupted while they go to Nakiga in order to seek a cure for Hakatri. Inaluki is off being seduced, or whatever by
Omu.
Omu comes later to Asua. And is Omu the Whisperer? Am I remember her name right?
Yeah.
Omu is the Whisperer, and she has a role here, and she's just as creepy here as she is later on, I guess.
Yeah.
She was always kind of a goth girl or
something. Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, Inaluki's corruption is a big part of this story, and how, in some ways, you know, he's a more sympathetic character than what this evil, angry entity in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. We see that there's nobility to this character, that he has the capacity to love, you know, but he's also got this honor thing. You know, they're very a lot of the decisions they make in the story are consequences of honor and their code and the rigidity with which they adhere. And both brothers, that's the one thing they really do have in common, is that honor is what drives them, you know, and it drives Inuluki to take his oath, which results in all the tragedy, the oath that he will not go back to Asua until Hidohebi, the dragon, is slain. And it also is what leads to all the pain that poor Hakatri goes through, because his honor and his love for his brother essentially puts him in the position where he ends up getting this horrible dragon blood spill all over him, and he's in agony and everything else. So yeah, there's a really important understanding of Inuluki in here, I think. You guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because Inuluki definitely seems like very brash, very prone to decisions out of self-interest, all this stuff, the suspicion of the mortals and all that. And yet, I would have loved to see, and we saw the seeds of it, like off, you know, kind of off screen happening, like being seduced and Nakiga, and then when Omu came to Asua, and that whole thing. I kind of would have loved to see a little bit more of that transformation, you know, because you see the seeds of it, but where he ends up as a Storm King is still quite a big leap.
So Cass did not get to witness that, of course.
Right. Exactly.
We're limited by his perspective in that sense, but that would have been very cool.
But I think the seeds are there, and you know, he just makes comments every now and then, like, you know, that are kind of the anti-mortal style of attitude, and he's like, you know, they're going to be, you know, it won't be long before they're just, you know, breeding everywhere and taking over here, and he can kind of foresee that happening, which indeed kind of did come to pass as far as we know. You know, the mortals population did grow, and they did end up going to war, I think, with the Scythi and fighting them out of Asua. So he's just kind of, you know, jumping the gun a little bit on, and things look like the relations between them seem like they're pretty harmonious, like right now, and maybe, you know, if there were more efforts made, you know, like by people like Hakatri to bridge the divide, and you know, maybe that outcome wouldn't have happened. So you know, it's maybe the fear of the other and the lack of reaching out that maybe isn't part of cause of this, but all that's in the gap between this book and Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. So we're not exactly sure kind of how that all played out. But and then seeing that it was like the mortals running away as the dragon, you know, was coming down on their trap that they laid, and Hakatri stood against it, and the mortals all ran. Like, that was like the clincher for Inuluki. I think he was never gonna get over that you know, they were one of the reasons why his beloved brother got so grievously injured. But you know, it seems like he has his genuine love and regard, and so, like, I was thinking, you know, Inuluki was going to be more of like a cause of, you know, bad things that happened to Hakatri, but you know, he played his part in the whole dragon slaying, and they went according to plan. It was kind of just like bad luck of a horse, you know, tripping. That stepped in a hole and tripped and fell, that kind of threw everything off. Otherwise, it looked like their plan might have worked. And it looks like also, like, even though he was so stubborn about killing the dragon, like, it seemed like the dragon was a real threat to everyone in the area, and that, like, Hakatri also was like, yeah, he really wanted to take care of this problem, and so, you know, it's not all Inuluki's fault that it happened, and it was in service of this kind of good cause, it seems, of taking out Hidohebi. But yeah, it was fascinating just throughout, like, in all their interactions, where it was like Hakatri and Inuluki talking, and they had some interesting interactions, like talking with you know, a Norn exile who's living out on his own, and talking with different Scythi, like, nobles, and they're trying to ask for help, and Inuluki is just like this hothead. He's just so impulsive and just so emotional, and Hakatri's always like, you know, talking him down, trying to smooth things over with their hosts, and just seeing their personality difference. You know, they really were like yin and yang, but Hakatri also throughout just has this love for Inaluki and this belief in him. And later when he's hurt and injured and Inaluki's associating more with the Norns, he doesn't want to hear slander of Inaluki. He doesn't want to hear people talking badly about him. Maybe he doesn't want to accept this kind of path that Inaluki's going down, but I think it's implied that in a later scene that Inaluki is communicating with Omu, and Hakatri like had his eyes open, and Payman thinks that he was like hearing that, and I think that's one of the reasons maybe why Hakatri ended up deciding, you know, he has to go and leave, and Inaluki can become the new protector, and hopefully he'll grow into like a noble ruler here if I give him the space for that. And but yeah, so those dynamics between the brothers were so fascinating, and Inaluki was just an extremely complex character, but so hot-headed, so impulsive, and such a foil to the kind of, you know, extremely mannered, respectful Hakatri.
Absolutely. We have we did address this actually early on during the non-spoiler.
I think you could.
Thoughts on reading Brothers of the Wind? Ben says yes.
I think the novel, it works as like a standalone novel. I think it tells a whole satisfying story, and you will no doubt be lost in terms of not, you know, a lot of the world building, and but you don't necessarily need to be caught up on all that to experience the actual like story that is Brothers of the Wind. And there's a lot of emotional impact that just comes from the events that happen in this book alone, and then you'll be able to actually see characters in Memory Star and Thorn who you'll have a lot more context for, and so that I think that'll make reading the big books interesting in a way that you know, would be if we reread them right now with this added context. But I think it would totally work.
Okay.
It's a valid point, actually. I think about like it's such a big series and it's so involved and there's so much world building and everything, and like especially Dragonbone Chair, it's like such a slow burn. So I feel like for the people who are not necessarily yet sold on the series, and we experienced this, right, Philip, when we were in the previous reading group, is like some people were not quite keen on, or like it took them some time to get into Tad Williams' writing style because it's so deliberately slow. And I think that's part of its charm, but that's not necessarily going to be the entry point that sells everyone. And so if somebody wants a sampler of his writing at its, you know, arguably up there with his best, you know, like up there, because you know, The Last King and all that stuff, like seems like we've all been enjoying that even more than the Memory Star and Thorn. So it's like if somebody wants a quick sampler of like in a contained story, this might be a really cool way to experience it.
And we have a question from Heidi. What is your favorite scene from this book? And Heidi also follows up with, mine is when Hakatri goes to apologize to the Scythe Lord who's suffering so much. Actually, that was my pick too, Heidi.
Yeah.
Great pick. That's the
Great
moment
pick.
in Mezutua when he is apologizing to Enezashi for stealing a witchwood tree from their sacred grove, which actually Enezashi stole because he's kind of a douchebag himself. Okay. And he's also not a fan of the mortals. It's interesting to see the different factions here, even among the Scythe, in terms of those who are more compassionate, like Amaterasu and Hakatri, and toward us, you know, schmucks, us mortals, who are showing up on the scene and are clearly a threat to the Scythe and the Zidea in general. So that means the Norns as well. But yeah, that was a scene that just absolutely that was an amazing scene, because you hear this guy Enezashi, who's hitherto been simply an angry, rigid, you know, absolutely uncompromising, hateful, spiteful. Even he is just like, yeah, okay, I forgive you. You know.
Oh my God, so powerful when Hakatri comes out in agony and's like,
and he bows.
I did wrong, and I lay my life at your hands if you want to take it. And then seeing Enezashi immediately just be, I forgive you, you're forgiven. Like it was such a powerful scene, like those beats, and Yeah.
when he's
Oh,
staggering there and like it hurts to even kneel to bow, you know, and he like does the full kind of tradition of acquiescence or like begging for forgiveness. That was incredible. I felt like a close second for me also was when it's all about Hakatri for me. When he lifted that Witchwood spear thing.
Oh
To
yeah,
oh my god,
playing
he
Hito
just like
Heavy. Yeah,
runs out there and like with the force of 5 humans, you know, just lifts that thing and oh man, that's just
that's what
an
has to be
unbelievable.
done. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a
I
noble.
really liked. Yeah.
Go ahead,
I
Ben.
really liked some of the quiet scenes with that actually were kind of like side scenes with Payman and the Tanukadea at the exiles
At
um,
Ravens
yeah,
Perch.
Raven's Perch
Yeah.
Yeah.
with the mistress there, I forget her name, Ona maybe,
Ona, and then there's
uh,
Sholi.
and Sholi, and
Totally.
so like seeing him kind of entertain these two like kind of bored women as this exciting visitor from outside, and watching them interact, and him being so clueless, Payman being so clueless about maybe like Shelley's romantic interest, and I just ate all those up, and then even their letters when they were apart, like seeing like their back and forth letters, I really enjoyed reading, and I thought there was just so much great emotional and psychological nuance going on in their communication, and then seeing at the very end the emotional payoff of I'm here at Raven's Perch, Ona and Shelley are like playing with the child, like that was just a wonderful thread that kind of moved throughout the middle and later portions of this book.
That
And I
whole
think that's a very perceptive pick, because for me, without that relationship between Ves and Ona and Sholi, and then him having that satisfaction, that fulfillment of that relationship coming to something, this would be an incredibly bleak story otherwise. Without that pleasant domestic facet of this story, where I'm so glad that Tad Williams included it. It's Kess, not this. Sorry, Kess has this relationship going for him here, because it really does change it from what could have been an overwhelmingly bleak story of pain and suffering. Because poor Hakatri, this noble figure, he's disfigured and in agony, and you've got his pain in the butt brother who's kind of responsible for it, and we know what happens to him, and then there's other characters here too where there's tragedy throughout this. Even the character who lives with the two Tinu in Raven's Perch, the Zaniko, the exile. Zaniko, the exile. Yeah. I mean, we know why he's grumpy. He's got the dragon blood on him too, and he's a bit of a different character as well. I feel like some of his poetry gets quoted in the other books too, like as a later character.
Oh,
am I right about that?
That might be.
Is he one of those forbidden poets that the builder guy keeps quoting?
Oh wow, I'll have to go back in and
you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look that up. But anyway,
I just have to reread the whole thing.
That's a great call. I'm gonna look that up and see if I can figure it out.
Can we talk about the amazing lore that came into play here with if we want to move on? Let me know if you want to mention any other.
I think Nikhil was going to make one point, and then we.
Go for it.
Nikhil, I think.
No. I was just gonna say, I also loved the whole Tinukadaya powwow kind of scenes, where they were all spending time together, and then the letters stuff. And I will say, like, the whole Payman and Sholi budding romance and all that gave me so much anxiety throughout the book. When he was like, I'm gonna go with Hakatri, I've already promised him, blah blah blah. It's like I was like visibly like, no,
yeah, totally. This is so classic clueless guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But thank goodness he got there in the end.
Yeah.
But he left us guessing right to the last page.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, I was fairly confident that would end happily. It just seemed like the tone of that was light and hopeful, and
Mm.
but yeah, I love that part. But I also love getting lore, like like little bits too throughout. But there was one little line of dialogue that was talking about the Tunukadea and about how like they are the garden. And I'm hoping we're gonna get more. I'm imagining we're gonna get a lot more Tunukadea lore, especially with the Navigator's children being the name of the final book. But like that was a little interesting line there about like what is their relationship to the garden and the place where they all came from, and where they're all at now. And that was really fascinating. And then there was great stuff around the kind of divisions among the Zendaya and the Zendaya and the Hikadea. Well, who were they before they divided? It was the Kidea?
That's the Zendaya, both of them together.
Zendaya is both of them. Okay, but with like what happened right before they left, and there's this dispute about the story of this famous, Hamako clan, like ancestor of Utuku, and whether he was killed unjustly, or if he kind of went crazy and needed to be kind of killed because he was killing other people, and then the only kind of truth that came out of it was the one that Utuku established in like the boat and killing off the people that had killed Hamako, and so there was like this consolidation of power in that clan, and with Utuku like coming away from moving out of the garden, which was really fascinating stuff there. I mean, Utuku continues to be one of the most interesting, mysterious, fascinating figures in this whole thing.
So Zanako, by the way, is quoted. The Exile's letter is quoted in Empire of Grass. Yes. So.
Wow. Well done. Well done.
You found that fast.
Yep. A couple of comments I want to highlight. Let's see. We've got this quote that Valoris is giving us here: "A fanatic heart will ignore what it does not want to know," said Minasao. "It will excuse even that which cannot be excused, and the need to find someone to share its bitterness."
That line hit like a ton of bricks when I read it. Great job, Valoris, pulling that out. That's one of those really quotes for the ages there by Ted Williams. Yeah.
Yep. And this is in the story. It's in the context of I think he's talking about Inaluki, and they're worried about him and his dealings with the Norns and Otuku in particular in that moment. I think that's where that context is.
Yes. Yeah.
Minasao is the one who is the son, but the protectors of the Enki Shao, I think it is the Scythi city that is close to the Stone of Farewell. That one. There are several, and we got a tour of these old cities that are abandoned for the most part when we read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. And then there's Heidi's comment here about the emotional scene between Hakatri and Likimeya is the daughter, I think, right?
Yeah.
Who is currently in is like in a coma when we left off in Empire of Grass because she was attacked. But anyway, yes, that's Likimeya, that Jiriki's mother, correct? Yeah.
And who do we encounter in Sesuadra in the Stone of Farewell? Who are we encountering there? Like that was Tad went full like mystery baiting with that interaction. He's like, she can like say so little specifics. She's like, I can't tell you anything, but at some point you're going to be faced with a choice. Remember this. It's
and like, the choice has to be him getting woken up by Utuku and whatever the choices is. We're going to be reading about it in here. I think
so, but. She was so big she couldn't even tell him like what type of choice you're gonna have to make, which way you should be thinking about. Like she just like went super vague and was like, but was not the voice that was calling him and so I hope we get some answers there because that was super mysterious and awesome.
We don't know who that was.
Yeah.
Yep,
but nice. But it seems similar to like what's happening in the present day with like the Tunukadea being called, and other beings being like called to the north, which we assumed was maybe like Utuku or Omu, like, but maybe it's some other force. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're
lot going
getting
on there.
some insights into it here in this book too. Whatever it is that's about them that makes them able to hear this call, we're getting some clues about it in here, I think. But yeah. In terms of their being part of the, what is it called? Not the dream road, but the ocean.
Yeah, the dreaming sea.
The dreaming sea. Yeah. So they've got some special connection to that. And that is why they're hearing this call, maybe, in The Last King of Osten Ard. But hopefully we'll see. And Mick Scarfield is asking us, have you guys discussed the fan theory on the 8 great ships that bring the Gardenborn to Osten Ard from the garden to escape the unbeing? I mean, no, we don't know the
fill us in on the theory.
Hey, Scarfield, you're going to have to spill the beans. What's the theory? Unless it spoils Into the Narrow Dark or the last book. But otherwise, it's fair game. And
another fun aspect of this book was all the traveling we get to do. Like we see Aswa, certainly a lot of that, but then we head into the Serpent's Veil, kind of in the forest, and then we go around to different places in Hernastir and towards, and we even visit Nakiga at some point. We go down to like some islands where like there's a Tunukadea village, where there's like an older city that is kind of like in ruins and abandoned, but there's still Tunukadea living there. Interestingly, Utuku stole their breathing harp, Master Witness, which made an appearance in the series. I think we visited the breathing harp, I think, in Nakiga at one point.
That's Kemen Tari, I think, is that island, right? And that's where Prester John comes from there, right? But then it's called Warrenston.
Wow. Okay. Great. Yeah, great details. I love going down to Naban and like they see this big mortal city, like a preview of kind of what's to come, and like meet with a bunch of mortals trying to come heal Hakatri or gain favor, and then they go off into the Ran and visit Quanatupal before it became a real city, Quantopa, and then they journey through the Thrithings, but when it's just basically a grass wasteland with a few bands of herders and bandits, and then we find the stone, and then we so we end up going a lot of the places that we visit throughout the series, but seeing them thousands of years before was so fascinating. That was cool.
Although, it's interesting, throughout all this journey, you've got this relationship being portrayed between Kes and Hakatri. It's a bit of a Samwise Frodo relationship, isn't it, in some ways, where you do have, and it's something that Tad Williams, I think, explores much more deliberately, is that it's a relationship of exploitation on the one hand, but of course, Kes feels all of this duty and this sense of incredible, the most important bond of his life. He's even willing to forsake his own personal happiness. He never would have ended up with Sholi, if it weren't for the fact that he was blown off that ship at the end by that storm. He would have probably tried his best even to swim back on if he could, to be that loyal to Hakatri. But that relationship is built upon a historical relationship of exploitation between the Sithi and the Vow, as they call themselves, right? So there is something that's always, as beautiful as it is, as beautiful as that bond is, and the loyalty that Kes has, and the compassion that Hakatri has. Picking out this child and saying, okay, you're going to be my armiger, and there's never been a Tinukadea armiger before, right? So obviously he's a very forward-thinking individual. Yet I think that because the possibility of equality between the two is non-existent. Yeah. In that social hierarchy that exists, there's always going to be something that is going to get in the way of that relationship. It's at moments they should be friends. If this were an ideal situation, they would be friends, but they can't be friends because it's a servant master relationship. So it's an interesting exploration, I think, that he's
Yeah,
doing.
so incisive there, and I love at the end. Well, throughout, like there are moments where Hakatri is kind of getting a little upset with Payman, but then pulls himself back. And other characters are commenting on how Hakatri might have hidden some, important information about the Tanukadea from him. But then at the very end, Hakatri's trying to save his life by telling him, like, I've foreseen your death. You have to go back. I'm sorry. You've been a loyal servant. Like, he really was this kind of noble, truly honorable part of this master-servant relationship, but he wasn't a cruel master, and he was considerate, and in the end really did, I think, see all of what Payman had done for him, and all of the incredible service and loyalty, and did not want him going down with the ship with his fate that he was going towards. So it was really noble at the end of him pushing Payman away, which actually led to him getting off the ship and saved. And that was a really intense scene there. But so many interesting things going on with that master-servant relationship. So I loved hearing your breakdown of that, Philip.
Yeah, any thoughts on that, Nikhil, on the relationship between Kes and Hakatri?
Yeah, I feel like it is complicated, isn't it? Because on the one hand, Payman is happy, or he was happy, and I think part of it was not knowing what he didn't know.
Yeah.
Or he thought he was happy, and maybe that's something I've always been interested in general, is like, if a character thinks they're happy, they could be happier, they could be more fulfilled, having a more complete life, but they believe they're happy. It's how close are they to being actually where they should be? It's like that whole interplay. So his love for Hakatri was so beautiful, but it was also came with its own burden, and it was Hakatri's sense of duty that kind of burdened Payman. So yeah, all this to say is I feel like it's very nuanced actually in that way, because on the one hand, Payman was treated well, by Hakatri, as well as a servant could be, I guess. But there was a genuine love of Hakatri to Payman, as was evidenced by the ending when he was like, "You got to go," like, your life is more important. And I feel like for an ordinary servant-master relationship, that would not hold. That's not like something that you would ever see. So, yeah. And obviously, I'm really glad that he ended up with Sholi at the end, and that he like was able to. That was like what I was hoping for the whole time, from when they first met. I was like, please, God,
it would have been too bleak otherwise.
Yeah, I was like, don't do this to us, Dad.
But Kes is not just like a loyal servant. Like, it's he has all this real personal feeling for Hakatri that he feels when it hurts him to see Hakatri in pain, and
he actually shares his dreams and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something there where would that have happened? Was that a product of the dragon blood? Was that because he's a Tenukerea and they have this capacity, they have this special link to the dreams, sea or whatever?
Yeah.
Or was it because of the closeness of their bond, that loyalty? Why was he sharing Hakatri's dreams that way? Why did he? He saw the vision of the strange woman at the Stone of Farewell too.
That seemed to surprise some of the Scythi when Kes told them about that. So yeah, that might be a very special case of multiple things going on there. But what is going on with the Dreaming Sea? And I feel like Williams just plucked some incredible little notes here throughout the book, including going to Kes's backstory very briefly with like his mother and father. But then towards the very end, we get he's in the ocean holding onto like a log, and he's remembering back to when his mother said, "Someday, at a moment you most need it, you will feel the garden inside you. You will feel the heartbeat of the dreaming sea." And then he said, when he got rescued, "I feel the heartbeat," over and over to the people that rescued him. And interesting stuff going on there. And Williams is being a little cagey about all that right now.
100%. And I hope we'll have some answers in Into the Narrow Dark and in the final installment, which what's it called? The Navigator's Children.
Yeah.
The Navigator.
And the Navigator was a Tanukadea, a famous
the Tanuki.
Yeah.
Whose
And-
armor they have unearthed, I think, right?
Yeah. They put the navigator's armor
Ruin.
onto
His name
Hakatri.
is Ruin, right?
They put that armor. They gave it to Hakatri, right?
Yeah.
They put Hakatri in that armor for some reason. I am so fascinated with what Williams is going to do with this resurrected Hakatri character.
Yeah.
Like, is this gonna what his? I think there were clues in here that like, you know, with Hakatri's injuries with the dragon blood, he was going to be closer to like stuff going on the other side of the veil than anyone else, and so like Nakiga seemed to be really interested in like talking to him, and you know, whether it was Utuku or Omu or the other kind of high-ranking you know, Norn people that were very interested in Hakatri after he got the dragon's blood and everything, and it seemed like he had some outbursts throughout this book that like Kess thinks are just like, you know, man's ravings, but we know as the reader are like, oh, there's probably stuff going on here about him like you know, connecting to entities beyond the veil, and we know like Omu the Whisperer is involved in that stuff, and so yeah, like Williams is like planting some little lore and plot seeds, I think, in this book that are going to be relevant for going forward. But I'm so curious as to like what consciousness, like, is Hakatri going to be like the same Hakatri as from this book, but you know, just
and Nikhil was saying earlier, you know, you can't think that Utuku is going to be able to manipulate and use Hakatri the same way she used his brother Inaluki, because Inaluki was bitter, angry, you know, looking for a reason to kill all the mortals, you know. Whereas Hakatri is a noble person, and if he retains any sliver of that nobility, he's not going to want to cooperate with Utuku, right? Yeah. So that's going to backfire, I think, you know. Yeah,
one would imagine, and I think if it involves it as some kind of choice that Hakatri ends up making, that you know, we would hope he's going to come down on the noble side, and I feel like, you know, Williams just laying the seeds for, you know, who his character was in this book, so making it more rewarding when we see him in action, I think, in the main series.
Yeah, unless she has some means of controlling him.
Yeah.
The same way that who was the one Norn soldier that Nazaru was having to put up with the whole like.
Oh yes,
he's been turned into a zombie kind of.
But like, he got bathed in the dragon's blood too.
Yes, and he got dragon blood all over him as well.
Yeah.
So is she going to try to do something similar to Hakatri that the other Norn, the sorcerer Norn dude, has done to?
That's interesting.
You know what I'm talking about? The captain of their group.
Yeah. Is that what do you think Omu was discussing with Inaluki when Inaluki's like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I love my brother too much. Like Williams is being quite cagey with that stuff too, where we didn't get like the full conversation between Omu and Inaluki.
What was the dude's name? The
Mako, right?
Mako.
Yeah,
he's the one who the captain of of Nazaro's group who gets.
That's right. Yeah.
Who gets boiled in dragon blood and is now essentially a zombie creature being controlled by the creepy little magician dude from there.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember all these names. But yeah, okay, this will be interesting. I think we get. It's funny how a book that is set 1,000 years before the series we're in the midst of is giving us all these like, ideas about what's happening in the middle of the series. But that does speak to how reading this in the middle of The Last King of Osten Ard could be a good idea as well. You know, but
yeah, I mean that's where he wrote it, right? And so like. Just where his own headspace was, it's probably drawing all these connections directly between, you know, those Empire of Grass and Into the Narrow Dark, like the books that bookend this one.
That's on Oprah. That's funny, Miss Garfield.
Wait, did Miss Garfield? Did you ever give us that fan theory?
No, because I think someone thought maybe it could be spoilery or something.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Yeah.
When we're done, we hope that Mick Garfield will give it to us.
Yeah.
That fan theory. So, any final thoughts, guys, on Brothers of the Wind before we conclude?
I guess just one thing also occurred to me, and I don't know if this is now that you mentioned, Philip, about the dragon's blood and the whole idea of like maybe using that to manipulate Hakatri, that seems more in line with like a plausible theory than what I had in mind. But just kind of backtracking a bit, I was thinking also where we leave Hakatri is where Payman leaves him. We don't know what happened when he went out into the horizon to, find a cure and all that. Like, we don't know. Did he still have the same morals that we left him with? Did something happen to change his viewpoint on things as well in the interim, right? Because we never saw him like die or like we don't know what happened there.
Yeah, there's a gap there. Yeah, so that's a point. Yeah, we don't know how much time transpired also between Kes being separated from him by the storm.
Yeah,
and was their ship sunk off the coast and bones
or was he living for like hundreds of years in total agony every day and being sorrowful about being separated from his family? Like that could have turned him in more bitter maybe. That he left behind his whole life and now he's in horrible pain, like, and horrible dreams on top of that, like every day.
I mean, in terms of where they find the bones in the first book, The Witchwood Crown, in terms of where they find the bones, it's not far off from where Kes was blown overboard, I think. Right? I don't think it would be implausible to assume that led to the shipwreck, which led to Hakatri being eventually buried where he was. But we don't know. Like you said, it could be a lot more time that he's suffered and lived after that. So, all right. Well, any final thoughts? All right. Yeah. Well, I am so glad that the two of you could join me for this discussion, and you guys are really enriching my fun with the series. I think we are all sad not to have Andy here today. Hopefully he's all good. But we will continue. Hopefully he'll be back with us next time when we do what's next, guys? Into the Narrow Dark.
Ooh.
And I think it's going to be Nikhil's turn to host. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Exciting.
Turn to host Into the Narrow Dark, the penultimate book in The Last King of Osten Ard, which means Ben, you're going to be hosting the last book, I believe. So,
yeah, let's do it.
Nice.
I'm so pumped for the end. I thought he ended the first trilogy magnificently with Green Angel Tower. I think he has a knack for how to build up to these humongous climaxes and resolution. Yeah. I can't wait to see how it plays out. I have no clue what's coming.
Yeah. It could go a lot of ways. We had a lot of questions. I didn't expect to have so many questions after reading this novella.
Yeah, same.
So I love it. I love that he's given me more questions, but also some answers and a really wonderful glimpse into what had only been a legend, a myth, and now we get to see the people behind it and the tragedy of their very personal story through the eyes of Kes, who's a very sympathetic, sometimes frustrating in his naivete, his ignorance of his own people, his own culture, but a lovable character nonetheless. So, and we are about to end, but hello there, Nasser. Great to see you. So thank you again, guys. Thank you, everybody in the chat. You guys are awesome. We are so glad that you are accompanying us on this journey through The Last King of Osten Ard. We'll be back in a month or some change, perhaps. We haven't decided exactly when, but this summer we will be finishing The Last King of Osten Ard for sure. So, all right, but that is it for us for now. I'm going to see if I can actually end the stream. Here we go. Bye, everybody.
See ya.